Hello everybody, today I just wanted to show you guys a tier 8 Infernal Sorcerer, Infernal Lightning Spear Sorcerer Infernal Horde clear. Cannot speak, that's okay. Alright, so I just wanted to go ahead and show you guys the best build here and just talk about my thoughts about this. So one thing that's interesting about this build is it actually is kind of bugged. So I think in this video I did not have on Stormswell, but apparently the Stormswell aspect is bugged and it's causing almost a 120% DPS increase. So if you're wondering like why Lightning Spear Sword was just so insane, it's actually a mix of bugs and obviously the build's just really strong. Now this build's really fun. I am kind of curious though as to why they made Fractured Winter Glass affect all conjurations, because I like the idea, I like what they're trying to do. They're trying to make creative builds for it, but it's like, why does the Fractured Winter Glass affect Lightning Spear? Like, I like the idea personally of the Fractured Winter Glass actually affecting, Ice Blades, and then them actually making a couple more versions of this unique that does similar to the same thing, where it's like, when you cast a Lightning Ball, you also cast a Lightning Spear, or something like that. So then you could have a Lightning Ball Sork with a, Lightning Spear Sork, so it makes a little bit more sense. And there's not so much overlap, because I feel like with this, you're kind of just getting the benefit of, like, a bunch of different effects, which, don't get me wrong, that does happen. But yeah, so that's just something I was thinking about. I kind of hope they changed it a little bit just to make it more in line with that and maybe add in more uniques. But at the same time, if they leave it like this, okay, that's fine. It's still a really cool item. It still has a really cool purpose. And there's other ways they could nerf this just to make it not be so crazy. But honestly, I don't even know if I care for them to nerf it. I think I'd rather them just leave it strong. If they're going to change it, I'd rather it be that, fundamental change that I'm talking about, where it's like they're not changing it because the build is too strong. They're changing it because the item doesn't really make sense. It's like it doesn't make sense for the item to do this, so they should change it and make another item that does a similar effect or the same thing, but in a more thematic way. Because that's the whole point of uniques, is they're supposed to be thematic, right? And I don't really see how the Fractured Winter Glass that revolves around Frozen Orb should be doing lightning stuff. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But that being said, another thing too, I think I'd like to see them change on the Sork is actually the passives. So I noticed something when I was been playing Sork, is that it feels like I take the exact same enchantments every time, right? Because if you take the Fireball one or the Firebolt one and it causes things to burn, then you can benefit from anything that says damage to burning enemies. And I noticed that a lot of the fire stuff doesn't necessarily say specifically fire damage to burning enemies. It just says you deal more damage to burning enemies. So you get a lot of overlap with that. I honestly think the enchantment at power of the sorcerer is pretty weak. I know some sorcerers might disagree with me, just because they might like how good Firebolt is and how good Ice Blades is. But at the same time, it's like that's all that's being ran. There isn't really a whole lot of change that is being ran there when you compare it to, like, a Necromancer's Book of the Dead, who I think has a very good class mechanic, or the Barbarians that have very good class mechanics, plus a bunch of extra aspects. I really feel like Druid and Sorcerer are kind of left in having some of the worst. I mean, don't get me wrong, they tried buffing the Druid Spirit Boon, so I can't complain, but I think Druid and Sorcerer have some of the worst class mechanics when it comes down to it. I think they really should both see some changes. Not necessarily because they're weak, but because, I guess, like, they're limited, if that makes sense. Like, I feel, the Barb uses all kinds of stuff. They get a bunch of extra aspects. The Rogue, they have 3 different ones they use across different builds. On top of that, they also get extra aspects. And I think that's another thing that's kind of plaguing the game, that's going to make Rogue and Barbarian always seem to come out on top in the long term. Now, obviously, Barbarian isn't as strong right now, but it will be strong again, just inherently to how it works. It has 2 extra aspects over all the other classes, and Rogue also has 2 extra aspects over the other classes as well. And this might seem like, oh, you can always one-hand and then also get the offhand. But the thing is that a Rogue gets to do that same thing and not lose their 2-handed affix, right? Like, they get to use a bow without having reduced effectiveness to it. And it's the same thing with the Barb. They get 2 two-handed affixes plus 2 one-handed affixes, right? And it's just like that right there is stronger really than any of the class mechanics, I think. Like, they really should be changing this stuff, because I think overall it's going to make Sorcerer and Druid fall behind a little bit. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, they have buffed Sorcerer a lot, and I think Sorcerer is doing really well this season. but I think it's only going to be temporary. I think, you know, once this season's over and they add in more aspects, it's just going to be the same thing. I think Barb and Rogue are probably going to have, like, the best, in terms of just general strength, is probably going to be the highest across most seasons when you look at it from, like, a statistical perspective, as opposed, not just, like, on a, you know, season by season. Obviously, Barb isn't the best. I don't think Barb is the best class by any means this season. They have a couple good builds in S tier, but at the same time, they definitely took quite the fall to where, but you can look at, like, the tier list. Most of their builds are considered, like, A tier now. It's like, oh no, what a bad thing. If anything, they're actually very close to being balanced. But again, I think that can change at the drop of a hat as seasons go by, as they add in new stuff. I mean, I've been having a lot of fun playing the Whirlwind Twister Barb. And I do think some of their builds probably could use buffs or something like that. But I am very interested to see how they change this, or what they do about the fact that Rogue and Barb just have such massive advantage over the other classes, being able to use two offensive aspects. Because, I mean, man, like I'm telling you, there's going to be some new offensive aspects that come out that are just going to become staple at some point, and it's just going to be nuts. Not to mention the ability that they also get to use extra unique items. Like, I just can't even stress how crazy it is, you know. And one solution I was thinking about for Druid I thought would be interesting was, instead of just making it to where, like, you know, the Barb gets 4 weapons, okay, that's cool. They should keep it that way. I like the thematic there. You know, Sorcerer doesn't get anything extra. I actually think Sorcerer should get extra jewelry. I think that makes sense. I think Sorcerer should get extra jewelry, or they should get a second orb offhand slot. I think that would be super thematic and make a lot of sense. I think Druid should get an extra helm slot. So if you look at the way Druid's balanced, they have a lot of power put into their helmets, right? You have things like Vasili's, you have things like Tempest Roar, right? I actually like this. I don't think this is bad. I think it would be fun if they actually gave us like a second helm slot, you know, like where it's like you get to wear multiple spirit helmets or like spirit dresses or something like that. Granted, it would make them kind of similar to Spiritborn in that aspect, but I do think it would be fun to see, you know, the Druid get something extra too, right? I don't actually think the Necromancer necessarily needs anything extra, just because I think the Book of the Dead is that strong. To where they have like minions and a bunch of sacrifice bonuses, and I really do believe, and plus when you factor in like sacrificial aspect, I actually do think that the Necromancer class mechanic is strong enough. But I think Sorc and Druid are kind of falling behind because their class mechanics are not strong enough to keep up with, you know, the fact that the other classes just get extra, you know, offensive aspects and extra weapons, which also comes with extra stats and extra potential of uniques in future seasons, even if there's not any made yet. So I'm curious to see what they do. I would imagine that they're going to do a massive rework of the Druid one, and they should do a rework of the Sorcerer one to try to make it more interesting. But who knows? We'll see. But anyways, guys, that's really all I have to say. I just want to talk a little bit about class balance and my thoughts on the Sorcerer and stuff like that. So thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.